seriously popular.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to MAGAland. It's Friday, April 11th. My usual partner in podcasting, Kelly Lako, is out for the day, but I am joined by our political reporter, Charlie Spearing, straight from D.C. How are you doing, Charlie? How are things in D.C. with all the madness?
It has been a wild week, Hermania, and we're really happy for Friday to finally hit.
We're going to be giving all the updates, of course, in the tariff war because it's continuing, as well as claims of insider trading by the Trump administration. We're also going to talk about Robert Kennedy Jr. saying that he will know the cause of autism by September. We also will talk about the Supreme Court ruling against Trump and a Space Force colonel being removed after criticizing Vice President J.D. Vance. The FAA is back in the headlines after 2 American airline flights carrying members of Congress clipped wings at DC's Reagan International Airport. But before all of that, we're going to be speaking with special guest Anthony Scaramucci. You know him as the former White House communications director from the first Trump era. We'll be right back with him right after the break.
Welcome to MAGAland.
We're back here in MAGAland with Anthony Scaramucci. He is a survivor of the first Trump White House, and he's now the host of the BBC podcast, The Rest is Politics. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Scaramucci. How are you?
It's good to be here, but it's like Austin Powers. You know, I'm not dead, but I'm badly burned. Remember when he fell off the cliff? I have survived it, but I'm still badly burned.
That's what we want to know all the things about. First, of course, we want to start this show with the top story on everyone's mind, especially because I've seen you talk about it online, is these tariffs and the pause. Our last episode, we were late again because we had discussed what's going to happen. And then once we were done recording, the 90-day pause was announced, except for the tariffs against China. Now, you, Mr. Scaramucci, have been in the room with Trump. They are now saying this was the plan all along. Trump is a genius. Even businessmen like Bill Ackman, who had criticized the move, are basically saying, I'm sorry, I did not know how brilliant Trump was. He knew how everything would play out. What's your take on that?
I don't want to curse on your podcast. I'll just say that's complete BS. He's out of his mind. He's doing things reactionary. Nothing is planned. The 10-year U.S. Treasury went from 4% to 4.5%. So said differently, we now have a 15% increase in the cost of our borrowing around the world as a result of Trump's insane and irrational trade policies and the arbitrary, unpredictable, capricious nature of what he's doing. And so I guess the real question is, because you asked me about being in the room. When you tell Trump when you're in the room, you're crazy, pull back from this, this is not going to work, you get fired and you get kicked out of the room. People think I got fired because of the phone call I had with the journalist. I didn't get fired by that. If you know Trump's personality, he thought that was funny. I got fired because I was literally fighting with him over a policy issue.
What was the policy issue particularly?
Because it was a national security issue, I can't really talk about it, but I'll just say this to you. He said to me that I was a deep stater. And I looked at him, I said, well, I haven't even been to Washington on a field trip. How could I be a deep stater? But, you know, his broader point was I wasn't supporting what he wanted to do, a result of which he fired me immediately. I got into that argument with him on Friday. On Monday morning, I was fired. And so these people know that, and they don't want to go through that stress and that supposed humiliation. It turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me was getting fired. But those guys know how bad this policy is. They know how misguided this policy is. They're going to praise him. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw that cabinet meeting the other day, but it was like one flattering comment after the next. What are these guys doing? They're embarrassing themselves. They're embarrassing their family members. When the fever breaks, and it's 5 years from now and Trump is disgraced and out of office, you say, what were you doing at the time when he tried to destroy the global trading system? you're going to say, well, I was there as a willing sycophant and I was there praising him in the cabinet meeting and in the cabinet room. It's disgusting.
It does seem the first time around, Trump kept people like you around, which they call rhinos or part of the deep state, which I think are just more traditional Republicans who believe in the free market. But this time around, he's specifically not having those people around that gave some people peace. When you saw Donald Trump with more traditional Republicans, you thought, oh, well, he's still going to be within the norm of what a president is. But that's not the case anymore. Yet, he's more popular this time around than ever. How do you feel about that? That back when you were in the Trump White House, you were culturally canceled just for being next to Trump. But now they're allowed to support Trump.
The really interesting point that you're bringing up about his popularity. He is popular in some ways. I think his popularity is a direct result of the culture war. If you ask the average American, they don't like the woke stuff. They don't like the pronoun designation. The country culturally is center right. But if you poll the people on trade, he has a 36% approval rating on trade. If you poll the people on the economy, he has a 41% approval rating. But he is the Napoleon of the culture war. He is the field master. He is a general, second to none. He can see the whole playing field. And he does things on the cultural battlefield that other people are not willing to do. As an example, he runs an ad. There's probably 5 or 10 transgender athletes that have played in women's sports in the entire country, 340 million people. But he must have spent $200 million running ads during the presidential campaign related to this issue because he knew it would trigger his followers. So yes, you are correct. He is very popular culturally, but I think the tariffs in place now are going to cost the average American between $400 and $900 per month in additional costs associated with the goods and the services they need for themselves and their families. And I think that's going to bite into his support once those tariffs really start to hit.
Mooch, we all know that you were pretty happy to leave Washington, D.C., go back to New York, get back in the markets. That's where you're most happy, I think. How did you finish up the week in your investments? Obviously, a lot of Wall Street people very unhappy with how that went down. What's your feelings?
I'm down. Listen, I'm a long-only guy, Charlie, so I am down. I'm probably down a little bit less than the market. And that's primarily because I own a lot of Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been fairly sticky the last couple of trading days. Gold has done very well. Assets where people are searching for safety. I feel like Bitcoin is transitioning from a risk-on asset into something that's a little bit more of a safety asset, almost like digital gold. I'm down. I'm a long-only investor. I tell people we're long. We're going to ride through this. Obviously, we got rewarded 2 days ago when he put the 90-day moratorium on, but I think the markets are sloppy now because they realize even though he put the moratorium on, the more aggressive measures, he's still got 25 and 10% tariffs on some of our biggest trading partners. And obviously, this nonsense with China is going to be really bad for the American consumers.
Well, that's my next question. The administration is saying we've isolated China, and that's sort of what they claim is their goal all along. Do you think isolating China is good or bad? Are you ready to move on beyond China? It seems like so many of Trump's supporters are ready to move on, try to decouple our economy from China and think it's worth the pain. What do you think of that?
Let me tell you why we have not isolated China. I'll just give you an example. Yesterday, China said, okay, no more liquid natural gas imports from the United States. And so they stalled all of our tankers heading their way with our LNG. And they said, we're going to take that LNG from Australia. And so they flipped a $1.5 billion trade situation overnight. I guess the U.S. now will have to sell that LNG to Europe. Who knows if they'll get the same price that they were getting from the Chinese. So the Chinese are ready for this trade war, Charlie. The Chinese also have a culture of face saving. The Chinese are used to poverty. One thing about Americans, and I think you guys will agree with me, we don't like poverty in this country. We're not used to the deprivation, but the Chinese are like, no problem. You want to try to impoverish our people? We're okay with it. They're running propaganda on state television right now, repeating the Vice President Vance interview over and over again about peasants. We're borrowing from Chinese peasants.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that. You're right, because authoritarian regimes, first of all, don't have to win elections, so they can just do whatever they want to the population. But as you're saying, that peasant comment has not helped at all. I saw that you're saying that JD Vance should apologize. Tell me about that.
Of course, I'm saying that because he's in the Trump camp of double and triple down. And I guess they're up to 14D chess now. And they're never going to say that they're wrong about anything. And they'll never offer an apology to anybody, which is why, of course, I'm saying that they should, because I like inflaming them as much as they like inflaming us. But here's the thing I would say is that the Chinese are not, and I'm going to repeat this, they're not cornered. They're not walled off. You can watch Fox News commentators all night, and they can pretend that 5G chess is happening and all this sort of nonsense, but it's not. And the Chinese are making inroads in Spain. They're making inroads with the EU. They're making inroads with Australia, which is one of their biggest trading partners. And it's going to be the opposite, actually. It's going to be isolation America. This is, guys, effectively a Brexit of America. It's almost like an Amexit, a Mexit. America exiting from the world for no sound reason, just because they have a jack leader in Donald Trump. It's going to weaken living standards. It's going to increase our deficit. It's going to increase the borrowing costs it already has. And it's an absolutely stupid and insane policy. And what's embarrassing for the United States is that there's a group of leaders in Washington that are so afraid of Donald Trump, they will not tell him what I'm telling you and your viewers and listeners.
I think you have a good point, but at the same time, you don't hear Democrats pushing back against this because going against China is politically very popular. Do you see any kind of Democrats who are seizing this moment to be like, well, let's not do this with China. Donald Trump is actually doing the wrong thing and maybe we can be friends again. Do you see any Democrat making that motion over to the other side of the argument?
When I talk to the Democrats about this issue, and that's such a great question, they're in the James Carville camp. You're right. Perhaps they wouldn't say anything anyway because China is a hot issue here in the United States. But they're in the James Carville camp that their enemy, the Republicans, are creating massive self-inflicted wounds. Let them continue to do so. The average House race right now is plus 13 Democrats. So keep this up. We're going to go into a global recession, a very steep one. Americans will be worse off in 2 years than they were on election day, and the Democrats will likely win the House. It's harder for them to win the Senate, but there's a chance that they could also win the Senate. I think their attitude, Charlie, is why say anything? Why intervene here? Let these guys create this self-inflicted wound.
What's your opinion about Scott Bessent as Treasury Secretary? There's such a big difference between Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick, who were in this administration, where the previous it was Mnuchin and it was Gary Cohn. From a financial perspective, why do you think that Trump's actually doing it this time? We know he wanted to do it the first time, but he never pulled the trigger. Why do you think that is?
He tried to pull the trigger. Let's just point out that Mnuchin and Cohn are tougher guys. He tried to pull the trigger. They blocked him. They said they weren't going to implement it. Cohen even took a executive order and ripped it up and threw it in the garbage can. And he said that this would be a colossal nightmare. They all threatened to resign if he pushed it.
It's those old school Republicans we were talking about that are no longer around this time.
But Trump was actually less confident in himself as a president 8 years ago. So when he was pushing this nonsense and he got rebuffed, he backed down. But now he's got willing supplicants. He's got willing sycophants. Guys, that cabinet meeting was ridiculous. Okay, it was like an ass washing session. It was just ridiculous.
What are your thoughts on Elon Musk's participation? Because he did speak out against the tariffs.
I think Elon is between a rock and a hard place. If you really want me to analyze that, I think he's in it now. I think the problem is when you get in it, all types of cognitive dissonance fill your brain with wanting you to stay in it. It is very, very hard to admit the mistake. By the way, I was a Trump supporter, so I had to face myself. I had to face my ego. I had to face my human frailty.
I was saying, I compared you with Elon Musk. I was telling Charlie that to me, during Trump's first term, he grabbed onto you in a similar way. Back when not everyone was supporting him, he was like, look, this is like a business guy who has made money and he supports me. And he showed you off.
Well, I was the first person on Wall Street to offer Trump support. But I was also in August of 2019. I tried to stay loyal to him, guys, after I was fired, but it became impossible. And I said, for my family, for my country, I have to speak out against what he's doing. And so he lost my support in August of 2019. You guys tell me it's 6 years later. And I said if he returned to the presidency, he would wreak havoc on the global economy. He would hurt the United States. He would try to pull us away from our allies. He would certainly hurt the cause of freedom in Ukraine, which he has done. And it would be a nightmare for all of us. So for me, I think Musk is going to get there, frankly. I think Musk is a very smart guy. I just think he's between a rock and a hard place. I don't think Musk will be speaking favorably of Donald Trump 12 months from now. And remember, let me just do this for you because this is a little bit of an Austin Powers impression. Look at me. There's only one person on planet Earth that has lost $100 billion, and that would be Elon Musk. Okay, so getting Trump elected, yes, he spent $300 million on the campaign, but look at me. He lost $100 billion. You see? Very bad stuff for Elon Musk.
You mentioned Russia. Finally, I want to get your take on what Trump wants out of Russia because we just found out his envoy is in Russia to meet with President Putin. So what do you think this will end in?
I don't understand the end game. If I'm being brutally honest with you guys, I don't know what the end game is with Russia because he's doing something against the interests of the United States. And so Rahm Emanuel said it better than me. In 80 days, Donald Trump has tried to reverse 80 years of hard work by American political leaders and American diplomats around the world. So when Witkoff comes back from Russia, you tell me what he's saying, you tell me what Putin is saying, and then I'll tell you, honestly, how traitorous it might be.
We always discuss here the Democrats are scrambling at a time like this where they could just be like, look how expensive eggs are. They continue to be like chickens without heads. How would you advise them to fight Trump?
They would never listen to a guy like me. I went on Gavin Newsom's podcast last week and said, you idiots, stop fighting with each other. You have 6 different parties that are organized under the code name Democrats. Cut it out. You're in a fight for the democracy. You're in the fight against an authoritarian. Join forces, open the tent. And I got a lot of criticism for this. Bring Elon back. Elon is a lifelong Democrat. Welcome him back as the prodigal son and get him back in the tent with you.
Do you think Gavin Newsom has a chance? That's why he's sitting down with people like you on his podcast to try to moderate.
I like Gavin. I think Gavin is evolving. I think people would say that he was too hard left 10 years ago, but I think Gavin is actually more open-minded now. I think Gavin has learned the hard way about the hard left. And I was with Andrew Cuomo last night here in New York. We're facing this issue with the hard left here in New York. They want the criminals out on the street. We don't want that.
Do you think Andrew Cuomo will be back to get back on the stage?
He'll be the mayor. Yeah, I think he'll win. People have had enough. Remember, that's also part of the culture war that Trump is winning. People have had enough of this nonsense.
Well, that was a lot of insight.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
We'll be right back with more MAGAland news after the break. Back here in MAGAland to catch you up with all the Trump stories over the last week. Charlie, let's talk more about this cabinet meeting. I want to point out to one moment where Elon Musk indeed appeared again. Something interesting happened. He caught the estimate of how much Doge was going to be changing from 2 trillion to 150 billion. That's a big difference. Let's take a listen.
And the very talented Doge team, I'm excited to announce that We anticipate savings in FY26 from reduction of waste and fraud by $150 billion. And and some of it is just absurd, like people getting unemployment insurance who haven't been born yet. I mean, I think anyone can appreciate come on, that's just crazy.
I liked Matthew Iglesias' take on this. I'm going to read it. He pointed out the moment and he said, I'm glad Musk has reduced his original estimate from 2 trillion to 150 billion, but I'd love to see him adopt more rigorous practices and explain why he's had to cut his estimate by 90% and what he learned from getting this so badly wrong. Do we deserve an explanation of this difference?
Well, absolutely. I think he's just cutting back the initial expectations because by all accounts, he's expected to leave at the end of May, early June from his official position, even though he's not technically the head of Doge, as he completely says. He's still in the White House serving as an advisor to the president. That could be a sign that he's trying to reduce expectations so he can declare victory and leave. At the same time, he also has the option of saying, I'm leaving, but my team's still in place. They can keep looking for the 2 trillion. Easy to wriggle right out of that one. We saw during this cabinet meeting, Musk is no longer the focus of attention. He's on his way out, and everyone else is ready to move on with the political business of the president.
Musk didn't seem as activated during this meeting as the last one. The last one he was really enjoying. What's the talk in DC about Elon Musk? Because a story came out this week. They think he's annoying. They saw that someone said he's so unfunny and always trying to make unfunny jokes. And they just cannot wait for Elon Musk to leave DC. What are you hearing?
Everyone really appreciates Elon because what he brought to the table, but they're not necessarily happy with the way that he's sucking up all the energy. Trump seized his spotlight back with all of this tariff stuff, so maybe he's ready to get back to the work of his businesses and leave the Washington politics up to everyone else.
We have some good news about trade maybe coming from India because turns out that J.D. Vance and his wife, who is the first Indian American and Hindu second lady of the United States, are going to India later this month. How the vice presidential couple has been well utilized in this administration. Usha gave her first interview in the position to the Free Press. She's truly impressive, brilliant. I just think she really helped this administration.
Her first public interview went out, and that JD and Usha are now planning on making a trip out to India. And it coincides with this idea that India is ready to make a deal on trade. And we certainly saw the Indian Prime Minister Modi get along with President Trump. They have a pretty good relationship. Modi met with Vance when he was in Europe to talk about foreign policy and trade. This is a really good opportunity for India to lock down a deal, to have a visit with J.D. Vance and his wife, to really set themselves up for strong relations with America.
I also want to get your take about this claim by the Trump administration that this was the plan all along, that 70 plus countries were begging to trade with the U.S. What do you think really happened yesterday?
It was Howard Lutnick that went with President Trump down to Mar-a-Lago on Thursday. And then Bessent traveled separately down to Mar-a-Lago on Sunday to talk with the president, predict what was going to happen in the next few days, and come up with an exit ramp. That's why Scott Bessent says, we had a discussion about this on Sunday, and this is part of this strategy. So I really think there was a lot more strategic back and forth going on between the two than initially a lot of people thought. It certainly looked chaotic, as President Trump repeatedly said that there would not be a deal. But it was clear that Trump was waiting and watching for a specific moment when he could pull the trigger and declare a pause and declare victory. It's clear that an exit ramp had to come at some point. And I think that he waited just as long as he could before pulling the ripcord on this trade tariff war extravaganza.
And that brings us to all these claims or questions about whether there was some sort of insider trading or manipulation of the market, because if earlier this week, the Trump aide gave an interview where someone said he had said that Trump was planning on pausing the tariffs, and this made the stock market recover before the Trump administration said, no, that's not true. We're not planning on pausing them. Then it came back down. So now people are saying that Trump was just engaging in some sort of insider trading. Can you explain that to me?
Democrats really jumped on this idea that somehow Republicans knew in advance that Trump was going to declare a pause. That's why there was this sudden surge of trading activity before the pause was actually announced. Certainly, Democrats didn't get this advanced knowledge, and that's why you have them protesting. We know that both sides do this. Anytime they think they have an edge on investments, they will make that investment. And it's funny to see Democrats complaining now of insider trading when they're out of power. This is very typical.
We have to give you guys an update of Robert Kennedy Jr. because he's been doing a lot. And I'm confused by everything he's doing. He continues to really emphasize the cause of autism. And on what he has said for decades, autism is not genetic, that there's something that's causing this rise in autism. We have throughout the years heard him say a lot of unfounded things, but now he's claiming that by September, he hopes to know the cause of autism. Let's take a listen.
Vaccines that are given to children during the first 6 months of life were ever studied. We're going to look at vaccines, but we're going to look at everything. Everything is on the table. Our food system, our water, our air, different ways of parenting, all the kind of changes that may have triggered this epidemic. It is an epidemic. Epidemics are not caused by genes. Genes can provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. So we know that it is an environmental toxin that is causing this cataclysm. And we are going to identify it. We are narrowly focused on identifying it and using as many scientists as we can from universities and research centers all over the world to focus them through NIH, through Jay Bhattacharya, to focus them on answering this question.
So, Charlie, I think this is related to the fluoride in the water. It seems Robert Kennedy's mission is to find what the true cause of autism is.
I see this as a product of the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again. He has a very large political movement that wants to see results, and they're very impatient. They thought by getting RFK in here, he was going to make a lot of major moves to shake up the food, medicine, health establishment, and really drive a lot of these issues home. That's why he's out there in public talking about fluoride in the water. That's why he brought the issue of autism to the cabinet meeting. He's got to answer to a lot of his activists who are very impatient. And we've already seen a lot of them turn on him the way he's handling the measles by getting out there on camera, recommending the measles vaccine. That has upset a lot of these MAHA people.
I was shocked by that.
Yet the medical establishment is like, if you're not even going to promote the measles vaccine, then what are you even doing? We're trying to cut out this sudden bump in measles. As the national health secretary, you got to get on camera and do this. So he's juggling the two worlds. He has his own PR people really trying to send the right message to his people to keep them satisfied, but at the same time run the Department of Health. It's still very much up in the air whether or not he's succeeding. It really rings to me a lot like his presidential campaign. You just weren't necessarily sure where he was going or what he was doing. He was always just trying to put the best face forward on any sort of podcast interview.
The Supreme Court ruled that Trump must facilitate the return of a man who was deported to El Salvador. I'm lost, Charlie, with all these court orders that block and then allow and then reverse. And then what's happening here?
Overall, this is where the courts will ultimately side. Yes, the president has the right to deport Venezuelan nationalists who they consider a threat to the country. That's something that they ruled in favor of. But at the same time, in this specific case, you're always going to see the courts rule on the side of due process. So I really think that in this case, it's a message to Donald Trump. Trump's just wanting to get anybody who has even a whiff of a MS-13 or a Venezuelan gang tattoo.
But not even a whiff, Charlie. And that's what's concerning. And even Joe Rogan said so. Most of the people sent to El Salvador, there were no claims or accusations that they were tren de Aragua. They were just undocumented in the States.
That's enough for Trump to send him to El Salvador and say, get out of here. But that is not enough for the courts. You need to have due process. You need to have proof that he's a member of this gang before you just ship him out. Even though he was illegal migrant, he was working with his lawyer, working with the courts to try to make things right. That's why this story has become such a huge part of it, is because if you're just going to start deporting the people who are even trying to make things right, who the courts have actually put you on a path to citizenship, they want to see due process.
But finally, Charlie, we have to discuss once again aircraft issues and tragedies. I don't know what's going on. But at the same DC airport where we saw that horrible tragedy earlier this year, several members of Congress were traveling in an American airline plane that clipped the wings of another plane.
Luckily, it was still on the airport when this happened. And this is at a time when all the members of Congress are rushing to get out of Washington. So, not a surprise that this happened. But the fact that it did happen and there's members of Congress on the plane, we saw Democrats voice an additional concern, like, how is this still happening? It's because Reagan is really a smaller airport and there's a lot of flights going through it, and they've only increased the traffic. And in spite of everything, there's still mishaps going on the runway. I think that Secretary Duffy was right to call to lower the temperature. And really, it's time to really make that the entire FFA much better, reform, revise, and slow the amount of traffic coming in and out of that airport. Things have got to change.
I mean, it seems they need to. At this point, like outlets in their headlines are saying, dangerous Reagan airport. Like, we're just going to have a major airport in the States that we know is dangerous.
Not a good look. Not a good look at all, especially with lawmakers coming in and out. You would think Congress would do a lot more to ratchet back some of the traffic, but it is unprecedented how many people run in and out of that airport.
Well, that's what's happened this week. What can we expect for this weekend, Charlie? What's Trump going to be doing? Playing golf again?
I heard he's actually going to go to a UFC fight, so that'll be plenty of entertainment for the weekend.
Remember to email us at welcometomagaland@dailymail.com and follow us on Instagram at welcometomagaland.